What's good, Internet? Today we are going to be talking about Mattermost. Now, you may not be aware of what Mattermost is, and hopefully this introduction to the tool will help you better understand how you can use it to be more productive in your day-to-day life. Mattermost is a modern digital workspace that'll help you be more productive in your day-to-day work life. Some of the major benefits associated with using Mattermost include the ability to have direct one-on-one conversations with your colleagues, as well as group messages with specific individuals that you need to chat with. You can use channels within Mattermost for topic-based, group-based, or even meeting-based chat. You can streamline how you perform collaboration on a project by injecting things like monitoring information or tickets into your chat systems. You can reduce the amount of email clutter that you receive on a day-to-day basis. You can search across messages and channels to see what's been said before. Now, we're going to get started with this demo team and demo account that I'm creating. You may create an account in a different way. For example, you may use GitLab for authentication, LDAP, or other services. In this case, I have a demo account being created, and this is using email-based signup, which may or may not be enabled for your server. If I click Create Account, you'll notice that you're welcomed to Mattermost. And this is really that entry point to understand how Mattermost works. There are a few key features that we're going to need to talk about for this to make sense. Those are going to be teams, channels, messages, search, and notifications. We can click through and read the tutorial if we'd like, and it basically gives us an introduction to how Mattermost works at a very basic level, and then sets us up. You'll notice right over here on the left-hand side, first along the top bar, you may notice this preview mode, email notifications have not been configured. Because this is a demonstration server, email notifications have not been configured on this server. You shouldn't see this in a production environment, but in certain cases it is something that you'll encounter. You can simply close this by clicking the X button in the top right-hand corner. Depending on the way that your administrator has set up the server, you may receive a message from a bot such as WelcomeBot. WelcomeBot, or similar bots like it, will provide you with information so that you can get started more easily. For example, in this case, WelcomeBot is welcoming me to the Mattermost demo server, and it's saying, here's some code of conduct information to be aware of. In addition, it can also add you to different channels that you may or may not be aware of. For example, I may be interested in development and programming, so I can click this button to be added to additional channels associated with that. In this case, you will see these little circle icons that are kind of pulsing. This is the continuation of the tips information, which Mattermost is going to try to give you as you get started. We're going to opt out of those for this case. If we return to Town Square on the left-hand side, we'll begin talking a little bit about how this works. At the moment, along the very top above our username, you see the word demo. In addition, you see this word right here in the URL bar. This is giving us information about the team. And a team is a digital workspace where you, your teammates, you can all collaborate in Mattermost together. Depending on how Mattermost has been set up for your organization, you may belong to one team or multiple teams. In some places, you will see that the team that you first join is a general group team for the entire organization, where managers may branch off into smaller teams to provide more focused discussion area. On the left-hand side, you'll notice that there are public and private channels as well. Channels are used to organize conversations by topics. They are located on the left-hand panel over here, and they can be both public, private, as well as direct messages. Now, it's important when you think about a direct message to not just assume that it's to a single person. It can also be to two other individuals. For example, to create a new one, I can click this plus icon in the left-hand sidebar next to direct messages. I can choose two individuals who I would like to communicate with. I can click go, and then it'll start a group chat between three individuals. This can be really useful if you're working on a specific project or you're holding a meeting where you need to have easy to reference meeting notes for all individuals within the group. But it's not going to be a long-running item that you really want to live on forever, which may be a better fit for a channel. We can close this or remove it from our list by clicking the X on the left-hand sidebar. With this, we then can go back to our public and private channels. Public channels, which are these topmost items, are going to be open to everyone on the team. New team members will automatically be added to 2 public channels when they sign up to Mattermost. Those are Town Square, which is a general discussion forum, as well as off-topic. Public channels are identified by this little globe icon on the left-hand side. That can make it easier to identify quickly and at a glance. If there are other channels available, you can click this More button below the channels to see what they are and join any ones that are of interest to you. For example, developers. Private channels, located below public channels but above direct messages, are for sensitive topics and are only visible to selected team members. Any member of a private channel can add additional members to that channel, and channel members can choose to leave at any time, but only the channel owner or team administrator can remove other members. That's an important distinction that I'll repeat. Anyone can leave the chat themselves in a private channel, but only the team administrator or the channel owner are able to remove other individuals. For this reason, it can be very valuable to make sure that the channel owner is a team manager or other form of leadership role. And as a reminder, direct messages you may be familiar with. These are for conversations between 2 or more people. Group messages are simply a form of direct message that have conversations among 3 or more individuals. Both are visible only to the people invited and involved to them. There is no way for other members to view these. Sending messages and replying to messages are important ways to make sure that conversations are continuing and active between members of your team. Let's say that we say, "Welcome, I'm new to the team." When we first send this message, we may realize that I didn't really give an introduction to who I am. And because of this, I may want to make an edit or remove my post entirely. If I click on More Actions, which is indicated by this ellipse icon, I can click on the Edit button and say, "My name is Kevin, and I'm setting up this demonstration." Providing this additional information can be helpful to other members of the team who may not be aware of who you are or what your role is. Giving an introduction is a very good first step when joining Mattermost. When a post has been edited or modified by another individual on the server, such as the system administrator, you'll notice that below it will be indicated with an edited note. In the event that you decide you wish that you had not sent that, you can delete a message. If we click delete, that will be deleted. You'll notice on this screen that it no longer displays to us. There's an important distinction here though. While it no longer displays to us, other members of the channel will see a message deleted notice. This means that while you may delete something, others may be aware that you have performed that action, even if they don't know what the post said. Some additional things that are going to be very helpful include mentioning. If you want to make sure that a specific individual sees your notice, you can begin with this @ sign and then begin spelling out the username associated with the user. When we do this, anytime that we perform this, we will receive a highlighted notification. In this case, you'll notice that above, we can see that when Jane said, "Hey Kevin," this highlighted our name because it matches our username. This is a configurable setting that you can set up what you want to be notified about. With that in mind, let's actually dig into configuring our account. In the top left-hand corner, we'll notice some additional pieces of information that we'll start to explain. First, we have the avatar icon. By default, this is going to be a colored icon with the first letter of your username. To the bottom right of this will be this little drop-down menu, giving status information to others, such as online, away, and do not disturb. At the top, you will see the team name if you have multiple teams that will be displayed along the left-hand side. And below, we will see our username. If you click on this little 3-bar icon, sometimes referred to as a hamburger menu, it'll open the drop-down menu. You'll see information such as account settings, team invitation information, creating new teams, leaving teams, and other useful reference material for Mattermost. In our case, we'll get started with account settings. First, you have your general settings. These are going to be pieces of information that should be available to all members of the server. In this case, we're going to type out Kevin, and I'm not going to put my full last name, but you should do this in a private setting. You can modify your username if necessary. Generally speaking, this should not be done, especially if using outside authentication techniques such as GitLab or LDAP, as this will break access to your account. You can choose a nickname. In my case, I'll choose my first name. This allows people to see what I prefer to be called, if it differs from my full name or my username. I can put my position, which is System Administrator Wannabe. As this account doesn't have access to system administration access, though it is something I would like to do if I could. A great first step when getting started with a new Mattermost server is setting up your profile picture. This is what I referred to as an avatar. This allows people to quickly identify you and differentiate your notices and messages from other people on the server. I can click Select, I can click Avatar and Open, and it'll automatically save this for me. I can click Save, and now you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that image has been updated accordingly. On the left-hand side here of the settings pane, we do have a number of other tabs available to us for other settings that we can configure. You can change your password if you're using email-based sign-in. This is not applicable if you are using GitLab authentication or LDAP services. You can also adjust notifications. This is something I highly recommend that everyone begin with, because at times it can be a little bit overwhelming to see so many notifications, especially if they have sound involved. In this case, we can choose only for mentions in direct messages, and personally, I prefer to shut off notification sounds. If email notifications are enabled, I highly recommend configuring this, as this can change and adjust how you actually work with the server. By default, this usually does send you email notifications after, I believe, 10 minutes. So this is a very important setting to configure. You can also configure mobile push notifications if your server allows for external access. And you can control words that trigger mentions. So in my case, I want to be notified anytime that somebody says my name in a case-sensitive or non-case-sensitive way. In this case, it's referring to both my first name and my username. Note that even though they're the same value in this case, that most often will not be the case. You can also control whether you get notified about channel-wide mentions. At channel, at all, and at here. These are important keywords similar to the mentions that we discussed briefly before, where instead of using a username, we can use @channel to notify every single member of a channel, including those who are both active and inactive at that time. We can use @all to notify all members of the server, not just the channel. Now, it is important to note that when I say all members of the server, that is restricted by team. So potentially a better way to phrase that would be all members of a team. And lastly, we can say @here, which is going to notify all active and away members of the server. I believe it includes away. It may only include active members at that very moment. You can also set up non-case sensitive words separated by commas below. If you have other types of nicknames, whether that's short names that you commonly go by, or other references that are commonly used, that may be something that you want to configure. You can also trigger notifications for replies. In my case, I generally tend to not trigger notifications on reply threads, but that is something that you can configure as well. If we go down to display, this allows you to control how Mattermost actually looks. The first and most important setting for most people are themes. Themes are going to control the colors and display overlook of how this actually looks for you. Personally, I prefer to use Mattermost Dark. We can click Save. We can also control how our clock looks. I prefer 24-hour time. And we can control what piece of information is shown for other users on the server. Some people prefer username, but if you're working in a company that uses ID numbers, this may be hard to identify who a user actually is. As such, I usually prefer to use first name and last name, though it is helpful at times to use nicknames, otherwise show first name, last name, if nicknames are commonly used on your server. We can also control things like how messages are displayed in a standard or compact manner, and other pieces of information such as display languages and channel display information. Lastly, you can also control whether the channel switcher on the left-hand side is visible or not. The idea behind this is that some people will prefer to use keyboard shortcuts instead of using the channel switcher GUI, and that can be a helpful way to save that screen real estate and reduce the number of active items on screen. There are also additional advanced features that may or may not be available to you. I don't recommend adjusting these unless you know explicitly what they do and why you're looking to enable them. And at this point, this gets us started with the basics of Mattermost. And the next question is really, what comes next? There are a number of different things available to us, ranging from messaging basics, searching, as well as actually using some of the features to format our messages a little bit better. If you wanted to search, you can do so using the search bar in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to switch my theme back to Mattermost's light theme, which is a little bit easier on the eyes when we're trying to read during the day. I'll click Mattermost and I'll click Save, and I'll close the settings pane. It's a little bit easier to see the search menu now. Along the top, you can also see flagged posts. If you wanted to flag a post that you would like to come back to, you can highlight over a post of interest to you, and then right next to the timestamp, you'll notice this flag icon. If you click Flag for follow-up, you can then access flagged posts up here, jump immediately to them, and they'll be highlighted, and you can remove the flag when you've completed any follow-up activities that you need to perform. Using the mentions, this will also show you a history of all of your recent mentions that other users or bots have made to you. You can also pin posts. This isn't a common feature that I see used, though it is one that may be of interest. You can simply say pin to channel, and you'll notice that that will now be pinned. In this case, I'm going to unpin that. And lastly, you can easily see members of your team and additional information about them where possible. You'll notice on the right-hand side that we have the little chat bubbles, and by clicking on those, we can immediately drop into a direct message with that individual. I'll go back to a town square. If you need to reference a specific post at a later point, you can click on permalink. Permalink as a name may sound a little bit strange to you at first, but it's actually a very important concept. A permalink is a permanent link to a message that you can provide to other members of the same team so that they can access and review that message and the surrounding conversation that occurred. This is very helpful if you share a post, for example, with a team, and maybe somebody was out of office for that day, and you'd like to bring it to their attention the next day when they return. At this point, we have a good basic understanding of Mattermost as a basic system. Down here in the bottom right, we can choose emoji if we would like to put those into our message, as well as we could attach files. In this case, I'll attach my avatar. You'll notice that a preview is displayed underneath, and we can type out a message with this. Here is an example of uploading a file to Mattermost. And then when we hit the Enter key, that will send our attachment as well as our message to the other users. By this point, you may notice that some users, such as Jane Doe, have this empty circle icon. This corresponds with the status icon that we discussed earlier in the upper left-hand corner. A user who is offline is going to have that blank circle. When we go to away, you'll notice that this changes to a clock icon. And lastly, Do Not Disturb will change to a red icon, indicating that notifications will not be sent to this user at that time. This is really helpful if you're in the middle of a meeting and you don't want to be disturbed. Lastly, and potentially the most important thing, is how we can format our text so that it's easily readable for other members of this server. In this case, we're going to start off and go through some of the most common features. For users who are power users or want to learn more about what they can do, another option that you have is to learn more about what Markdown is and how you can use it, because Mattermost leverages Markdown to simplify text formatting for users. If we click on the emoji to begin, you'll notice that as we hover over any of these icons, there will be in the bottom portion of this overlay the icon itself, the name of the icon, and then between two colons you'll notice the name as well. For example, innocent between two colons. This is because when you're performing emojis in written messages, you're going to want to often type them out rather than having to select them from a menu. For example, if we type colon innocent, you'll notice that we get this hover menu or overlay giving us suggestions based on what we've typed. If we hit return, that message will be converted into the actual emoji. In addition, we can use a single underscore to type italics. We can use 2 star icons to bold text. You'll notice that each of these is coming first before the text that we would like and after. Because of this, it is possible for there to be cases where if you copy and paste text from other systems or services, that it'll look really kind of awkward once you actually paste it in, because it uses some of these control characters which are reserved for text formatting within Mattermost. We'll discuss how you can avoid that formatting later. You can also combine those two pieces. So you'll notice that in this case we have italics and bold. So if we wanted to use something that was both bold and italic, we could begin with the bold. We could do an underscore and type bold italic. Now, it is important that we close these, where we can think of the first one before the message as opening a tag, and then the ones afterward are closing that. So in this case, we indicated that this would be bold, and then we indicated that it would be italic. You have to close those in the reverse order, so first we close that it's italic, and then we close the bold. If we paste this, you'll notice that this is bold italics. There are other types of things that you can do. For example, strike-throughs. And as you're typing, you will sometimes see along this bottom right-hand corner helpful information that you can reference. For example, here's a reminder for how to do bold, italics, strike-through, inline code, pre-formatted text, and a number of other things. Clicking on this help will bring you to helpful information about messaging in general. You can also format things like headers using the pound sign. For example, we can do a large header. We can do a smaller header, or we can choose a even smaller header. This allows you to control things like document structures if you wanted to share meeting notes in a direct message. There are other ways that you can put in heading information, large heading, and you can use things like the dash symbol to underscore and format those accordingly. I find that a little bit harder to use. So personally, I prefer to use the ampersand or the # method used for the large header, smaller header, and even smaller header. Mattermost, though, isn't limited to basic text formatting like this. You can also do things such as lists, item 1, and I'm using Shift-Enter to drop down to the next line without sending the message. We can use item 2 and press Shift-Return. And if you wanted to indent the next item, we can space in by 2, and then we can type in item 3. And if we send this, you'll notice that this formats into a nicely bulleted list for us. This isn't limited to only unordered lists such as this, though. We can also do item 1, item 2, and item 3. And this is going to format it as a nicely structured, ordered list for us. Lists aren't limited to beginning with the number 1, so if we wanted to, we could also adjust this and have this begin with item 4, 5, and 6. One helpful thing when we get started with action items, especially if you're using Mattermost for meeting collaboration, is to use the task list markdown. If we type the tac symbol, sometimes referred to as a dash, and then the open bracket space close bracket, task number 1, that'll print out a nice checkbox that users can check as done or not done. Note that this isn't checkable within this itself. You do have to edit the message and say that this has been completed. This can be done by placing an X, either uppercase or lowercase, in between, and you'll notice that this gets completed. One other useful tool, especially for developers, is the ability to format code for other users. Let's say that I'm typing some Python code. If I'm giving only a small piece of information, I may do something like, let's say that I'm trying to give a discussion about async IO within Python. I can use the open backtick, and I can say, to import async IO framework items into your namespace, use, and then backtick, import async IO. You'll notice that when this gets pasted, import async IO is formatted in monospaced font and is easily readable. Similarly, we can also show, using 3 backticks, larger code blocks. For example, using 3 and then saying if name equals main, and we can say loop is equal to async IO get event loop. That works, and this will give us pre-formatted text in monospace font. As mentioned earlier, because there are different control characters to allow for italics, bold italics, strike throughs, and multiple other types of formatting, using this pre-formatted structure of 3 backticks, followed by a large block of text, such as this would generate italics, bolds, and bold italics, and then closing those backticks will allow us to share information that includes that control character without actually presenting the formatting associated with it. In this case, though, sometimes as we do programming, using syntax highlighting can be extremely important for other users who are trying to read our code. Using this isn't exactly readable. We don't really know what's name, what's main. Is this a variable? Is this a package name? Is this a function name? You may know from context, but it's not nicely formatted for easy scanning. We can use GitHub flavored Markdown, which uses this pre-formatted structure that we were using before with the 3 backticks. But on the opening line where we begin the block, we can specify the programming language that this is associated with, and then when we hit enter, this will be nicely formatted for us using syntax highlighting, so that we can actually understand a little bit easier what's happening within this code. You'll notice that if is highlighted in a bold black color, indicating that that is a control keyword. Main is highlighted in red, indicating that this is a string variable within our code block. This is very important for presenting information to others. Similarly, if we wanted to provide this same type of information without using backticks, without syntax highlighting, there is another way that we can do this. If you begin a line with 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and indent every single line underneath accordingly, when we paste this in, this will also get formatted as a code block. This is another time where making sure that you're using backticks to group or structure or hold larger structures of information can be extremely important. Otherwise, sometimes you'll have sections of your pasted text which look like monospace code, while other sections are going to be nicely formatted text. There are other types of languages other than Python that are supported. For example, ActionScript, Bash, Clojure, Go, F#, Fortran, Docker files, and many other languages are also supported. For a full list, you can review the formatting text section of the Mattermost user guide online. Lastly, we can start to get to other pieces of information such as block quotes, tables, and math formulas. Tables have a unique structure that is usually a bit hard for users to remember. And it follows the header, and then we can say that this is a left-aligned header. So we'll put a colon on the left side and use dashes across. And then we can go to the next line again, and we can say that this is a left column. You'll notice that this doesn't align perfectly. That is perfectly okay. Technically, I could do just this. I find that that's a little bit harder when I'm trying to look at on screen what's going to happen. But if we paste this in, you'll notice that this becomes a header, and we have our column. And you can do this for multiple rows across or columns vertically. So this could be header 2. And in this case, we may want it to be right aligned. So we'll put the dashes first, followed by the colon on the right-hand side. And we'll say that this is a right column. And we'll click Save on that edit. And you'll notice that this is now a right aligned column. Lastly, one thing that can be useful in certain disciplines are math formulas, and this uses the LaTeX formula. If we use the pre-format structure, we can type in LaTeX, and we can say x_k is equal to the sum n equals 0 of 2n minus 1, and then we could close this, for example. And this will get formatted for us in LaTeX math syntax formulas. This can be really useful if you're working in machine learning, for example, and you need to communicate to other individuals about specific algorithms that are in use. The last thing that we'll talk about today are block quotes. Block quotes use the chevron symbol, and we can say, sometimes referred to as a caret symbol. I prefer chevron. And we can say that this is a block quote. This is one that's really important to be aware of, because if you copy emails from certain types of services, you'll notice that you'll get this quote icon in a block quote syntax, even though you meant to actually paste in older portions of an email. This is a time, again, where using that pre-formatted 3 backticks above and below your message can become very, very important. And with that, that is a basic introduction to Mattermost to get started. There is additional information available to you online using Mattermost's documentation. and that is available at docs, https://docs.mattermost.com. And this will provide you with additional pieces of information that you can use depending on your interests. Hope that's been helpful, and hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining.